we make sure that patient organizations globally have access to good information on lymphomas themselves, and also help with their advocacy work to make sure that patients are getting access to the best care. We come to conferences like the European Hematology Association Congress because we want to make sure we have the latest information. As Lymphoma Coalition, also, we get the chance to talk about our work. And what we do as a coalition, one of the things we do is a global patient survey. And we do this every 2 years. So we just finished one at the beginning of 2024, which had over 11,000 respondents globally. So we get really good insight into what patients are thinking and also their caregivers. From that, we know that there are key areas in care that remain issues for patients. One of those would be the psychosocial issues that they face. So the emotional impact of lymphoma and some of those barriers to care. We saw in the 2022 survey that those feelings of anxiety and depression were severely heightened. So those patients that had them, 70% of patients said that their feelings of anxiety or depression were worse or much worse during and post-pandemic. And so for us, it's really important to close that gap. And how do we make sure patients are getting connected to the resources they need? And I think when we talk about that, most people think that they have to see a psychologist or they have to see a social worker. That's not true. Lots of different people within their care circle can help, including nurses, of course, not only in recognizing that they may be having these issues, but helping them connect to the right kind of resources for them to cope. And oftentimes that anxiety and the depression and the fear that they face can be eased with just really good information on their disease and their care. And often that is what is lacking for our patients, and is something that nurses can definitely help for our patients overall, is just making sure that their questions are being answered in an understandable way with good, credible information. Majority of patients are searching for other information over and above what they're being told by their doctor or their medical team. Sometimes it's because the information they're being given isn't being given in a way that is really understandable for them. But sometimes it's because their questions are not being taken seriously or are not answered to the best of somebody's ability. And so we see things like, patients with lymphoma talk about fatigue is the biggest impact on their quality of life. Yet oftentimes fatigue is not addressed by their medical team. And fatigue can be caused by many, many things, and we do understand that. But there are coping mechanisms for patients that work quite effectively for simple things like managing their time schedules and taking advantage of their peak energy phases. Other exercise, of course, helps if we can convince them to do some exercise. But as nurses, we can also help them deal with some of these issues that perhaps doctors are not addressing fully or don't have the time to fully respond to when they're having those brief clinic visits with their physician. So we always, like to talk about fatigue and make sure that there are fatigue clinical practice guidelines, that they're being followed, and that patients are being given good resources to help them cope with that. So those are two of the things that come up in the survey repeatedly. Especially if we go back and talk a little bit more about those psychosocial issues. Fatigue, we see, it doesn't matter what age you are. When you're diagnosed with lymphoma, everybody talks about fatigue and the impact. With the psychosocial issues, we do see more of those reported in younger patients, so those younger than 35. So those that are, at a different stage in their life, they talk about the impact, the emotional impact, and how hard that is for them. And then also we see it more reported in women than we do with men. That does not mean men don't get them. It means they don't talk about them. So finding different ways to address different audiences is also important to make sure that we're really able to help. It's like, how do we tease that information out and get people to the right support?